wrong for asking my girlfriend not to eat so much? I know the title sounds bad, but this is a pretty specific situation, so please hear me out. I, 26 male, have been dating a woman we will call Ashley, 26 female, for about 3 months. Ashley grew up financially well off and relatively privileged and has been a point of friction in our relationship, with her not understanding/grasping the level of poverty I and my family grew up with. It is also relevant to the story that Ashley is a heavier person and is a very vocal advocate for body positivity and will very assertively stand up to anyone fat-shaming herself or others. The other person who is relevant to the story is my grandma, who is 70 years old. My grandma is a wonderful woman, but she is both very proud and very broke. She likes to have us over for dinner and is an excellent cook, but financially, she can't really afford it. She refuses to take any money from me or anyone else and won't let anyone break food, saying it's her responsibility to take care of the family. She also takes offense if you turn down the invitation. About a month ago, we had dinner with her, and Ashley liked the food so much, she went back for a second and a third large portion. This is not done in my family. We all take a single small portion, as the leftovers are what my grandmother has to eat for the week, so Ashley taking more meant my grandma didn't have anything to eat for the rest of the week. After the dinner, I explained this to Ashley and she was shocked. I tried to bring my grandmother food, but she refused the charity out of pride. My grandmother has invited us for dinner again this weekend. Before we go, I tried to have a discussion with Ashley, reiterating my grandmother's financial situation and asking that she try to only take a single smaller portion so my grandmother can have food for the week. I said we can go eat again after the meal if she was still hungry. Ashley got very angry at this and said she will not be shamed for her eating and she will not limit her food and that no one other than her decides when she's had enough food. She also said I was fat shaming her. This whole ordeal has highlighted a lot of incompatibility issues and I don't know if the relationship is going to last, but just want some other opinions on this if I'm the asshole. So am I wrong for asking my girlfriend to limit her eating? No, bro, your poor grandma needs to eat too, man. Have some sympathy.
Story time about how I hooked up with my best friend's fiance and all of the groomsmen. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I repeat, this is not my story time. My best friend and I met 2 years ago. Her and I both worked at stripper clubs and we made a lot of money together. One day she met this guy at the club and he took her out on a date and then they got engaged about 2 months later. Yep, it was really fast. Me, on the other hand, I dated a bunch of guys and never really found anyone because they would all ghost me. When my best friend decided to get engaged, I told her I would help her plan the wedding. At first it was really fun, but soon my best friend turned into a bridezilla. She was the worst. She was always angry, super emotional, and didn't like any of the things that I helped her choose. Oh my god, and when it came to the cake, she was totally indecisive. That's when she started getting to a lot of fights with her fiance because he wasn't pulling his weight. Which, trust me, I totally understood because he was more interested in playing football with his friends and hanging out with his friends than actually helping her out with the wedding. This to me, of course, was a really big red flag. I actually started getting more and more suspicious of him, so I decided to do some digging. On his Instagram, I saw that he followed a bunch of local girls. So I decided to make a second Instagram and basically pretend I was him. I reached out to these girls and told them that I was him and that I just made a second account and that I wanted them to know that this was my account. And believe it or not, some of these girls fell for it and had full-on conversations with me thinking I was him. In order to find out information, I would ask them questions. And sure enough, some of these girls were telling him that they had so much fun the last time they saw him. One even asked to see him again. This really stressed me out a lot because I didn't know how to break the news to my best friend. At that time, I just didn't know how to cope with stress, so I basically went and got drunk. I was super upset at my best friend's fiance, so I decided to call him and confront him about it. So I called him and told him that we needed to meet up. And he said yes. Mind you, I'm still drunk. He shows up to my apartment, comes in, and brings beers with him. I was like, oh my god, he's actually gonna try to hook up with me. I knew it right away. Part of me was like, what the heck? But the other part of me was like, I mean, he is cute. Ever since he started dating my best friend, I could tell that he was a little flirty with me, but it never occurred to me that he actually wanted to actually hook up with me. But I knew that he was only doing this because he thought I was super drunk. So I started drinking some more beers and it happened. I woke up feeling super sick to my stomach. I knew what I had done and I didn't know how I was going to tell my best friend now. Thankfully, he had already left my apartment when I woke up. That same night, one of the groomsmen was hosting a party at his house. My best friend and I got ready together in her house and then we went over to the party. And the whole time she kept asking me what was wrong. She could tell that something was off. I couldn't even look her in the eyes. We went to the party and I basically hooked up with all of the groomsmen in one night. That's when my best friend's fiance came up to me and asked me what I was doing because he saw me making out with 3 of the other guys. He grabbed my arm and told me that I needed to relax and that if I wanted to be with him that I couldn't be hooking up with his friends. I was so shook. He actually thought I was going to continue a relationship with him, and the whole time I'm only doing this because I'm trying to get him out of my system. A few days passed by and I still don't know how to tell my best friend. So I cooked dinner and invited my best friend over. I was going to break the news to her. As soon as she came into my apartment, I just said it. I told her I hooked up with her fiance and all of the groomsmen, and that I caught him cheating on her. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I hooked up with my best friend's fiance and all of the groomsmen. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I repeat, this is not my story time. That's when I decided to confess to my best friend that I had done all of these horrible things to her. I invited her over for dinner, and as soon as she came in, I just vomited out everything. When I told her all of the truth, she said nothing. She stayed quiet for a few minutes. By the way, I was crying. I was like sobbing. She then started to laugh. I asked her why she was laughing, and she told me that the truth was that she didn't want to get married to him anymore, and that she already knew that he was being unfaithful to her, and that she knew that we hooked up. And when I asked her how she found out, she said that she actually followed him that night to my apartment, and that she saw he stayed in here for hours. She said she called my phone and I didn't answer, so obviously she connected the dots. And she told me that she didn't care if I hooked up with the groomsmen. She also said that she knew that he was hooking up with a bunch of girls around town, and that she had been following him for around 2 weeks, seeing who he was hooking up with. I explained to her that I was really drunk and that I just didn't realize what I was doing. Then she actually forgave me. She said that she had been planning on breaking up with him, but she didn't know how to do it, and that I actually helped her decide whether or not she should break up with him. But she was really angry. She was mostly angry at her fiance. So here's what we did. We got his car impounded. We even called his parents and told him what he had been doing. She even called the landlord and told him that he had been doing horrible things in the apartment and that he needed to be kicked out ASAP. She ghosted him and blocked him from everything. Luckily, my best friend lives in a gated community, so he actually couldn't come into her apartment. He even reached out to me, but of course, I blocked him and did the same thing. So now he was literally homeless, without a car, and since his parents were mad at him, they didn't take him in. So he had to go to stay with one of the groomsmen that I had already hooked up with. The next logical step was to sell the engagement ring. We went to a pawn shop and she got $15,000 for it. With the $15,000, we actually started our own little business and even went on vacation to Cancun for 2 weeks. He's still trying to reach out to her and me. He sent me messages on Instagram apologizing. And of course, he's asking me to convince my best friend to get back with him. We actually met this big director while we were traveling and told him about the story, and he actually wants to turn it into a movie. Who knows if it'll happen yet, but I'm hoping it will. And when it comes out, you guys will know who it is. Now we live in a really big fancy house. We actually run our business from home and we travel whenever we want. Now the question is, would you have forgiven me or not? Bye.
Am I wrong for telling my husband I'll use my maiden name for our baby if he misses the birth? So I am 37 weeks pregnant. Due to several health complications during my pregnancy, I've been told multiple times by multiple doctors that I might have to give birth next week as opposed to 2 weeks from now. Furthermore, that I may actually go into labor this weekend or any time leading up to it. Due to these same health complications, I'm having a C-section and my doctors do not want me laboring. So, should I go into labor, they are most likely pushing me through as an emergency C-section. My husband knows all of this. However, he's holding on to the 2% chance they give him that the baby could last the 2 weeks. His sister is also pregnant, 4 weeks behind me, and her baby shower is this weekend. It will be over an hour away, and that's without traffic. So weeks ago, I declined for both of us because it didn't seem like a good idea. Well, despite having a long conversation, the shower, which is 2 days away, has come up again. It turned into a fight as there are multiple reasons that should I go into labor, it's just a bad situation for him to be that far away. My husband wants to go and support his sister and see his family, and says I'm keeping him on a short leash for something that probably isn't going to happen. I told him maybe he's right and nothing happens, but said should he choose to go and choose to take that risk, that should I go into labor, he would most likely miss the birth or be extremely late. And if he makes that choice, then I would give the baby my last name versus his family name. My husband says I'm being an asshole for keeping him hostage and I'm always planning for worst case, and that my thoughts are going to trigger labor more than anything. I said if he chooses not to be a part of this, should I go into labor, why should the baby bear his name when he would fail on his duty as a father? He has been silent and moody since, only talking when absolutely necessary and saying that I'm trying to take everything from him. So it got me thinking, am I wrong?
Story time about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade. So a year before this all happened, I posted a picture on Instagram saying, add me on Snapchat if you want to be friends. Yes, I was that person. Anyway, so this really cute guy adds me on Snapchat. And after about 3 months talking, he said that he wants to meet me in person. And he didn't sound sus at all, so I was like, sure. So we met at this park that was like 30 minutes away. And we met there around 6 o'clock, so when the sun was setting. And he was super nice. It was super romantic. Well, then we went to his house. We watched a movie and we did the nasty. So after that, he asked me if I want a drink. And what I could have swore was 20 minutes later, I wake up in an abandoned farm shed with no clothes or anything. So I start screaming my head off. I don't have my phone or anything, so I start to run. And then he grabs me. He says, if you try to run or you try to scream, I am going to kill you. Life for Part 2 about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So like I said, I wake up in this abandoned farm shed. I don't have no clothes. I don't have a phone. So I try to run and he grabs me. He says that if you run, I will kill you. So I was like, okay, fine. What do you want from me? So he starts putting on lingerie and tells me to also put some on so we can take pictures together. What the actual you know what? So after that, he starts crying and he starts telling me his whole life story and how he's not who I think he is. Turns out that he's 32 and he just goes online pretending that he's 17 years old. So I just try to comfort him, right? It ends up working. He brings me my clothes, tells me to run, or else he's going to once again kill me. So I run, I go to this gas station, get picked up by the police, find my parents. Luckily for me, I paid attention to where everything was. He was arrested, he's still in prison to this day, and I got grounded for 3 months.
Am I wrong for rehoming my cat? So when I was 9, my parents received a 5-year-old cat from our local animal shelter. I agreed to getting the cat since I was 9 at the time, and of course I wasn't going to turn down the opportunity to getting a fluffy animal. However, I'd be lying if I said I loved the cat growing up. I didn't hate the cat by any means, but I came to realize that I'm definitely more of a dog person. However, we never owned any animals apart from the cat since my dad has a fear of dogs for some reason. Last year, I moved in with my boyfriend and I took the cat with me, since my parents thought that the cat had bonded with me more. I was fine with this since the cat does its own thing. However, problems began to arise when me and my boyfriend got a French bulldog puppy since neither of us had been able to get a dog up until now. The Frenchie was very gentle towards our cat and doesn't bother her. The cat, on the other hand, made her disdain for him very apparent. This was done through hissing, loudly shrieking, etc. This went on for a year, with the cat's behavior towards our dog gradually getting worse. I lived 2 hours away from my parents, so taking the cat back to them wasn't really a viable option. After making all the efforts I could to get my cat to get along with my dog, albeit to no avail, I decided to take my cat to the local animal shelter since cats tend to be easily adoptable when compared to dogs. My parents recently came to visit. While they were here, they asked me where the cat was, to which I told them I had taken it to the local animal shelter. A huge argument ensued, despite the fact that I reassured them that the cat had been adopted, since it was no longer on the shelter's website. My parents left shortly after, and we haven't spoken since. My boyfriend has sided with me on this, saying that had we taken our Frenchie to the shelter, there's a good chance it may have been euthanized due to the overabundance of dogs in shelters. So, am I wrong here?
Story time! And this happened to me like 40 minutes ago. So I was driving home tonight and my apartment building is on a street that's a dead end. So I'm gonna make this hair clip my car. So I was driving onto my street. So if this is my street and it like ends there, my apartment building is here. So I was coming with my car here and I turned there onto the street and I parked about here. So all I had to do was walk from here to here, which is like 10 meters. And that's like, what, 30 feet or something. So it's really, really close. All I had to do was walk there. So I parked my car, I got out, and as I started walking towards the entrance of my building, a man that was actually close to my building saw me. And suddenly, he started running towards me. And as he was running, he was yelling, "Shut your mouth! Shut your mouth!" So I, luckily, was still close to my car. So I jumped back in and I locked the doors. And just as I did that, the man arrived at my car. So because I was already inside, he went to the front of my car, so here, and he put his hands on the hood of my car. And he was like, "Get out of the car! Open the window! Get out of the car!" So I was sat there and I knew what I had to do was put the car in reverse and back out of there to go back from where I came from because that's the only street out. So I put my car in reverse and his hands are still on the hood and he's still yelling at me. And I reverse, and as I'm doing that, he like follows my car and is like, you know, like following my movement with the car. So I was like, okay, well, I have to like really quickly like turn to go that way because if he goes to block the street, I'm stuck. Like I literally can't get out. So he's following me, his hands are on the hood of my car. I quickly turn and I get out of the street that way and I managed to get out. I then had to drive around for about 25 minutes, waiting for him to leave my street so that I could park my car and go home. I'm just really tired. Like I just really want to be able to go home without that happening. I mean, I know that doesn't happen every day, but still, like it happens often enough that it's really frustrating. I mean, not only is it obviously scary, but it's just like, why can't we just go home without?
Story time about how I ghosted my boyfriend of 5 years. I know that sounds so bad, but he was a thief, a liar, and a cheater. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Like I said, my boyfriend and I have been together for 5 years. We met in college and were basically inseparable for the first 2 years. On our 3rd year of dating, I started working as a personal assistant for a big celebrity in LA. This meant I had to move to LA. You see, we lived in Texas at the time. Well, things got really bad after I moved. He wouldn't take my phone calls, he would totally ignore my text messages, and he would go out all the time. For the first few months, I tried to keep the peace so I wouldn't say anything, but eventually it got to the point where we wouldn't speak for an entire week. Luckily, my best friend still lived in Texas, so I had her follow him around for 2 days. And you'll never guess what she found. Shout out to my bestie. She showed up to his apartment early in the morning and waited for him to go to work, which he did. When he was done with work, she went back to his job to follow him back home. This is when she told me that he actually went to some girl's house. He didn't end up going home at all that day. This man actually spent the night at some girl's house. The whole time I was trying to call him and text him, and he did not take my phone calls. My best friend even took pictures of his car in this girl's driveway. Since I had this girl's address, I looked her up on the internet. I even found out her phone number because I paid some service online. And of course, I found her Instagram account. She had been posting on her story about hanging out with some guy. But the thing is, she didn't show the guy's face. She only showed his hand. Guess what? I recognized his hand in the picture because it has a tattoo on his pinky. So of course, I took screenshots. Later that day, my best friend followed him to a bar. At this bar, he met up with another girl. Unfortunately, I didn't have any information about this girl. I just knew that she drove a green car. My best friend followed him again the following day. He went to the beach, ran some errands, and then met up with another girl. Yes, we have 3 girls in 2 days. This girl was different because this girl was a friend of mine when I lived in Texas. And I knew she always had a crush on him, but she could never admit it. They went out to dinner and then back to her place. And again, my best friend sent me pictures of everything, so I had all the receipts. Side note, I think of my best friend spying on him and it makes me laugh. I hope you can all say you have best friends that are like that. So here's what I did. I got on the first flight back to Texas and did not tell my boyfriend that I was showing up at his apartment the following day. But guess what I find in his bed? Part 2 is story time about how I ghosted my boyfriend of 5 years. I show up to my boyfriend's apartment to catch him in the act, and you'll never guess what I found in his bed. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. My lying, cheating boyfriend had given me a key to his apartment. So I unlock the apartment and make my way towards his bedroom, really quietly. When I walk into his bedroom, I find him curled up in his bed with another girl. He's holding her in his arms, totally fast asleep. And the worst part is, I recognize the girl that was with him. It was one of the girls who I used to be friends with in Texas. I walked backwards and closed the door behind me. That's when I just started to cry. I couldn't believe that he had done this to me. While I was working my butt off in LA trying to make a future for us, he was in Texas dating 3 women at once. No wonder he never picked up my phone calls or even texted me back. So here's what I did. I had printed out all the receipts I had, all the pictures of him hanging out with other girls that my best friend took while she was spying on him. I laid out all the pictures on his kitchen counter, and I left him a letter too. I told him in the letter that I could never forgive him and for him to never contact me again. Oh yeah, and that I wanted him to pay me back the $3,000 he owed me. You see, when we first started dating, he needed a loan for his car.